I never imagined I would be walking down an aisle again at my age, not after everything life had already taken from me. Yet there I was, Jane Harris, 52 years old, in a soft cream gown that fluttered gently around my ankles, taking steps toward a future I had once believed was gone forever. The old hall smelled faintly of roses and wooden polish, fairy lights blinking like tiny stars above the guests. Every step felt strangely new, yet comforting, as though life had carefully laid this path for me and whispered, "Try again." If only the story had stayed that simple. But life never writes clean lines. It writes in smudges and tears. My son's face, cold, stiff, unreadable, was the first thing I noticed as I walked into the hall. Michael stood at the end of the aisle with his wife, Emily, both dressed elegantly, but carrying an energy that clashed with the celebration around them. His arms crossed. Her lips slightly curled into something between boredom and annoyance. My heart squeezed at the sight. The happiness that had been blooming inside me all morning flickered unsteadily. He should be smiling, I thought. He should be happy for me, but he was, and neither was she. Still, I forced myself to breathe through the tightness forming in my chest. Today was not about conflict. It was not about old wounds. It was about me, my life, my second chance, and about the man waiting for me at the altar. Daniel. My Daniel, tall, gentle, gray at the temples, and filled with a kindness I once believed men were incapable of carrying. 48 years old, a widower and someone who looked at me as if I were the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. He stood there now, eyes soft, hands clasped, smiling at me with that familiar warmth that made me feel seen, really seen. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I made myself hold onto that feeling. Because if I didn't, I feared the weight of what was coming would crush me. Rewind 6 months. That's when I met Daniel for the first time. I had been volunteering at the community library, reshelving donated books after a fundraiser. It was the kind of place where old wooden shelves carried the quiet scent of stories, where sunlight through tall windows made dust motes dance in the air. I found peace there, peace I hadn't known since my first husband, Richard, passed away 5 years earlier. Grief had sat with me like an unwanted tenant. Some days it felt like a quiet guest who kept to itself, other days it was a storm ripping through my chest. But by 6 months ago, I had finally started breathing again. That's the day a man stood at the counter, holding a stack of mystery novels and smiling like he had just stumbled into the best part of town. "These were my wife's favorite," he said when I asked if he wanted to donate them. "She used to read them twice, once for the story, once to see what she'd missed." He chuckled softly. "I don't think she ever missed anything." I looked at his eyes, warm, sad, hopeful, the eyes of someone who understood loss but had not let it turn him cold. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said. "Thank you," he replied. "She's been gone 3 years now. I kept these because I wasn't ready, but now I think someone else might enjoy them." His voice trembled slightly, not with grief, but with acceptance. And that was the moment I felt something shift inside me. We talked for almost an hour, about books, about life, about how grief rearranges you so deeply you never return to the person you once were. When he left, he said, "If you ever want company sorting through donations, I live 3 blocks away." I laughed lightly. "And you think that's a tempting offer?" He grinned. "Absolutely. Who wouldn't want to alphabetize romance novels on a Saturday afternoon?" I didn't know then that those words would eventually lead me back to the altar, back to love. But love, I learned, does not come without shadows. Michael, my only child, did not approve. He met Daniel 2 months after we started dating. I remember that day as clearly as the day he was born. We had invited him and Emily over for dinner. I cooked his favorite, lemon garlic chicken with rosemary potatoes. I was nervous, fussing over every detail, trying too hard, hoping too desperately. When they arrived, Emily's heels clicked loudly across the hardwood floor. She scanned my house as though searching for flaws she could pocket for later gossip. Michael hugged me stiffly, then shook Daniel's hand with a politeness that carried a blade beneath it. "So," Michael had said during dinner, slicing into his chicken with unnecessary force, "Mom tells me you're unemployed." Daniel smiled patiently. "Not unemployed. I do contract-based electrical work. Gives me time to volunteer at the community center." Emily exchanged a look with Michael. One of those looks that lasts too long says too much. She took a sip of wine. Oh, so, like side jobs? Like local projects, Daniel answered calmly, though I saw the flicker of hurt. Michael leaned back in his chair. Mom, Dad always worked full-time, good salary, stability. He looked directly at Daniel. You planning to get something more permanent? Michael, I hissed, but Daniel only placed his hand over mine gently. It's okay. It was not okay. Not then, not now, not ever. That night after Daniel left, Michael stayed behind, and he said the words that lodged themselves deep inside my chest. You don't need someone like him, Mom. Someone like him? Mom, he's not on your level. I'm not on any level, I snapped. I'm just trying to live my life again. He crossed his arms, jaw tight. You're being emotional. Dad hasn't been gone that long. It's been 5 years. He didn't respond. And I began to understand, slowly, painfully, that my son did not want me to move forward. Not really. At least, not with someone who wasn't wealthy, polished, or socially impressive. Someone who didn't fit the mold of the father he grew up idolizing. But I chose Daniel, and Michael never forgave me for it. 4 months later, I said yes when Daniel asked me to marry him. A simple proposal in the park at sunset, him kneeling in the grass with a ring that wasn't expensive but carried more sincerity than any diamond I'd ever seen. Yes, I whispered, tears slipping down my cheeks. 1,000 times yes. I called Michael that night. He didn't answer. He didn't answer the next day, or the next. Finally, 3 days later, he sent one message. We'll attend the wedding, but don't expect us to pretend we approve. The words hit me harder than I expected. I stared at them for several minutes, feeling something in me crack, not because he disapproved, but because he didn't even try to understand. Still, I held on to hope. Hope that on the day of the wedding, something would soften, something would shift. But standing there in the hall, walking toward Daniel while Michael and Emily glared at him like he was an unwelcome stranger, I realized hope can sometimes be a cruel companion. The ceremony began beautifully at first. My friend Linda was the officiant. The small crowd of guests smiled warmly. The music played softly. Daniel's hand trembled slightly when he took mine, and I squeezed back to reassure him. We said our vows, his tender, heartfelt, spoken with a sincerity that filled the room with warmth. My life was quiet before you, Jane, he said, voice thick with emotion. Quiet but empty. You brought laughter into places I didn't even know had gone silent. I love you, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel alone again. Tears filled my eyes. I heard sniffles around the room. But from the left side, from my son's row, came a tiny sound, a stifled laugh. I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't look, I couldn't, but I knew it was Emily. Then another quiet sound, a whisper, a mutter, a scoff, my son, my own son, humiliating my future husband as he poured out his heart. I blinked rapidly, trying to keep my tears from falling. Not the tears from the vows. No, these were different. These were the tears of a mother breaking from the inside. Daniel noticed. His thumb brushed my hand gently. He didn't look away from me, but I saw the subtle tension in his jaw. He heard them too. When it was my turn to speak my vows, my voice shook so badly I had to stop twice. I shouldn't have looked toward Michael, but I did. He sat leaned back in his chair, arms folded, a faint smirk tugging the corner of his mouth, as though he was watching a performance he didn't enjoy but felt obligated to attend. Emily whispered something in his ear. He chuckled lightly. And there, in front of all our guests, something inside me shattered. My son, my baby boy, the child I raised alone for years, the one whose scraped knees I bandaged, whose nightmares I chased away, whose future I protected with every breath, was mocking my happiness. Mocking my husband, mocking my choice, mocking me, but I pushed through the shaking in my voice. I spoke my vows to Daniel anyway because he deserved them, because he deserved my full heart, even when my son tried to tarnish the moment. And when the ceremony ended, the applause was warm, except for 2 pairs of hands that never clapped, 2 faces that never smiled, 2 hearts that had chosen cruelty over love. The reception was held in the same hall, decorated with soft gold draping, candles on each table, and photographs of me and Daniel arranged on a memory wall. Pictures of us hiking, cooking together, volunteering at the library, laughing until our eyes crinkled. Everyone loved that wall. everyone except Michael and Emily. They made no effort to hide their distaste. Emily wrinkled her nose, whispering loudly enough for two nearby guests to hear. Couldn't they at least use better quality pictures? Michael nodded, sipping from his drink with exaggerated disapproval. Mom looks older in these. She should have chosen better lighting. My blood ran cold, not because they criticized my age, but because they said it on my wedding day, in public, in front of guests, with no shame. I watched from across the hall, my chest tightening with every word. Daniel had stepped away to greet one of his coworkers, leaving me alone at the table. I clenched my hands together to stop myself from shaking. Guests noticed. They exchanged awkward glances. Some walked away uncomfortable, but Michael and Emily continued, oblivious or uncaring about the pain they were causing. When Daniel returned, he noticed instantly. "Jane," he whispered, placing his hand over mine. "What's wrong?" I forced a smile. "Nothing, I'm fine." He gently tilted my chin up so I met his eyes. "You don't have to pretend with me." And right there, with his thumb brushing my cheek, I felt the tears I had been holding back begin to spill. Not loud. Not dramatic, just quiet heartbreak slipping silently down my face. Because the pain of being hurt by strangers is manageable. But being hurt by your own child, that's a wound that bleeds deep. And I had no idea the worst moment was still coming. Because by the end of the night, my son and his wife would do something so cruel, so disrespectful, so humiliating, that it would turn my wedding day into a memory I would struggle to revisit for the rest of my life. The moment the band began playing the first slow song, the room warmed with soft lights and gentle smiles. Couples drifted toward the dance floor, older guests, young friends, co-workers, everyone easing into the glow of celebration. Everyone except my son, except my daughter-in-law. Daniel turned to me, offering his hand with that soft, steady affection I had come to fall in love with. "Dance with me?" he asked, his voice smooth, warm, unshaken despite everything happening around us. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, but because every time I glanced toward Michael and Emily, a cold, sharp anxiety twisted inside me. Their whispers, their sideways glances, their mocking laughter. Each moment had etched itself deeper into my chest, carving out pieces of joy that were supposed to be the foundation of my wedding day. But Daniel deserved better. We deserved better. So I nodded and let him lead me onto the dance floor. His hand rested on my waist, gentle but firm, and I felt myself soften against him. The music swelled around us, violins blending with piano in a melody that felt like it belonged to a dream. He pulled me close, forehead brushing mine. "You're tense," he whispered. "I'm trying," I murmured, trying not to let my voice crack. "I know." His thumb stroked the back of my hand. "Don't let them steal this moment from us." But they already had. I didn't say this aloud. I couldn't. Because admitting it would make the pain too real. So I forced a smile and rested my head against his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of cedar and clean laundry. For a moment, a brief, fragile moment, I felt safe, until I heard it. A short, sharp laugh from the corner of the hall, a laugh that didn't belong to joy, a laugh that cut through the melody like a blade. I stiffened instantly. Daniel felt it. He turned his head slightly, his gaze following mine toward the far end of the hall, where Michael and Emily stood by the dessert table with two of their friends, laughing, pointing, whispering, glancing at us with expressions that carried amusement. Not warmth, not even indifference. Amusement, as though my happiness were a joke to them. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Jane, do you want me to speak to them?" "No," the word came too quickly, too desperate. "This is my burden, not yours." He cupped my cheek gently. "Your burden is my burden now. That's what marriage means." My throat tightened so painfully it felt swollen, but before I could respond, the music softened into its ending, and the room erupted in soft applause. Daniel kissed my forehead. "Come sit, you need water." But before we could walk back to the table, the DJ announced the next part of the evening. "All right, everyone, it's time for the family speeches. Let's start with the bride's son, Michael." My stomach sank so fast it felt like falling through the floor. No, I hadn't wanted speeches. I had specifically told Michael earlier that if he didn't feel comfortable speaking, he didn't have to. I never imagined the DJ would call him without confirmation. I looked toward my son and immediately saw it. That smirk. that glimmer of something cruel in his eyes. Emily nudged him with her elbow, smiling wickedly. "Go on," she whispered loudly enough for me to hear. "Say something memorable." Daniel's hand tightened around mine as Michael walked lazily toward the microphone, one hand in his pocket, the other swirling the wine glass he carried. He didn't look like a proud son. He didn't look like a happy son. He looked like a man ready to humiliate someone. I couldn't breathe. Michael tapped the microphone twice, pretending to test it, though I knew he was simply enjoying the attention. Hey everyone," he began, his voice overly loud and slurred just slightly. "So, I'm Michael." He paused dramatically, then added, "the real man of the family." Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. My heart hammered in my chest. I wasn't really planning to talk, but he shrugged. "Mom S insisted on being the center of attention today, so I guess I can give her this one." A ripple of gasps floated through the room. Daniel's jaw tightened. I felt myself shrink. Michael continued casually, "I just want to say it's great that my mom finally found someone to, look Daniel up and down, to keep her company." A nervous laugh escaped someone in the crowd, one of Michael's friends. Emily covered her mouth dramatically and whispered something to the woman beside her, who giggled. Michael smirked, feeling encouraged. "Daniel here is, well, he's definitely different from Dad." He raised his brows teasingly, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But I guess Mom likes simple things now." The room went silent. Completely. Pain shot through me so suddenly I felt dizzy. A buzzing filled my ears. I clutched the table to steady myself. Daniel looked at me, hurt flickering across his face, though he tried to hide it, but Michael wasn't done. "Oh, and you should have all seen Mom these last few months, acting like a teenager with her new boyfriend." He gave exaggerated air quotes. Smiling at her phone, blushing, acting all giddy. He laughed meanly. Honestly, it was kind of embarrassing. My throat closed. I felt my eyes burning, my legs trembling. My heart pounding like it wanted to escape my body. Daniel took a step toward Michael, but I grabbed his arm weakly. "Don't," I whispered. "Please don't." If Daniel confronted him, it would only make things worse. Michael raised his glass. "Anyway, cheers to the happy couple, or whatever." He took a large sip and set the wine glass down loudly, then returned to his table, high-fiving one of his friends as though he had just told the world's best joke. The hall was silent. Dead silent. Until the DJ, visibly uncomfortable, cleared his throat and muttered, "Thank you, Michael." But no one clapped. No one. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I wanted the night to end. I wanted to run, to hide, to scream, to cry. Instead, I stood there frozen, humiliated, broken, shaking with a pain I had no words for. My son, my own son, my flesh, my blood, the boy I raised alone, the boy I sacrificed everything for, the boy I loved more than anything, had just used my wedding day to tear me apart. I didn't know what shattered me more, his words, his cruelty, his disregard, or the fact that he did it with a smirk, as though he enjoyed hurting me. Daniel placed both hands on my shoulders. "Jane," he whispered softly, "look at me." I lifted my trembling chin. His eyes were full of tenderness and fury, a mixture that did something strange to my heart, something that hurt and soothed at the same time. "You do not deserve this," he said quietly. Not from anyone, especially not from him. Tears slipped down my cheeks. I wiped them with shaking hands, embarrassed. "Everyone's looking," I whispered, choking on the humiliation. "Let them," he said. "They're seeing the truth." But I didn't want anyone to see this truth. I didn't want them to see my child destroy me. Daniel turned to the guests. "If you'll excuse us for a moment." Then he gently guided me out of the hall. The cool night air outside hit my face like a blessing. I inhaled sharply, letting the breeze wash over my burning skin, trying to swallow down the storm inside me. Daniel stood close, keeping his hand on my back as though afraid I might collapse, and maybe I would have had he not been there. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice cracking with shame. "I'm so sorry you had to experience that." He shook his head firmly. "Don't apologize for his behavior." "I raised him," I whispered. "I raised him better than that." "You did. His choices today aren't a reflection of you, they're a reflection of him." I covered my face with my hands. The tears wouldn't stop. They kept coming, soaking my palms, slipping through my fingers like all the years I had spent being a mother, never imagining the day he'd use his voice to hurt me. "What did I do wrong?" I choked. Why does he hate you so much? Daniel exhaled deeply. He doesn't hate me, Jane. He hates that you moved forward without needing his approval. I paused, breath hitching. Is that really it? It's part of it, Daniel said gently, but there's something else too. I lifted my eyes. He's grieving, Daniel continued softly. Grieving what? I whispered, confused. The version of you he grew up with, the mother who was always available, always sacrificing, always putting him first. I stood frozen. Daniel brushed a strand of hair from my face. He doesn't know how to accept that you're choosing a life that isn't centered around him anymore. I swallowed hard. The words sank deep, deep enough to hurt. Change is hard, Daniel added, but cruelty is a choice. And that was the part that broke me. Michael had chosen cruelty, not once, not twice, but repeatedly, through the ceremony, the reception, the speech. The memory of it hit me again like a physical blow. I wrapped my arms around myself tightly, as though holding my body together was the only way to keep my heart from splitting open. Daniel stepped closer and wrapped me gently in his arms. Come here. I sank into him, feeling the warmth of his embrace melt some of the ice forming in my chest. He kissed the top of my head. You are not alone, he whispered. Not anymore. I closed my eyes, breathing in the comfort he offered. But the comfort was tinged with sorrow, because a part of me, no matter how deeply I loved Daniel, would always ache for my son. After several minutes, I pulled away, wiping my face with a tissue Daniel handed me. I should go back inside, I said weakly. People must be wondering. You don't owe anyone anything tonight, he replied, least of all Michael. But we still have traditions. The cake, the parent dances, the photos. Jane, he took my hand, we do not need to follow traditions for people who do not honor us. His words were firm, protective, loving, but I shook my head. I can't let his behavior ruin this for everyone else. Daniel studied me quietly. Are you sure? I forced a small nod. Let's just finish the night. He sighed softly but accepted my decision, kissing my forehead once more before we walked back toward the hall. As we reached the door, I hesitated. The music had changed to a lively beat. Guests were dancing again. Laughter floated through the air as though nothing terrible had just happened. But when I stepped inside, every head turned toward me. The pity in their eyes sliced through me like a blade. I looked toward Michael. He was sitting comfortably at his table, laughing with his friends, completely unbothered, sipping another glass of wine as though nothing had happened. Emily noticed me looking. She smirked and raised her brows mockingly, as if silently asking, "Why are you staring?" Daniel's hand slipped around mine reassuringly. "Breathe," he whispered. I did, barely. The DJ cleared his throat again. "All right, everyone, please welcome the bride and groom back." Guests clapped politely. I smiled weakly. Daniel and I walked toward the cake table for the cake cutting ceremony. But as we approached, I froze. My breath caught. The knife was missing. The decorative topper we had chosen, the small figurines that looked like us, was broken, one half lying on the table, the other on the floor. And written on the tablecloth in icing were the words, "Good luck, you're gonna need it." Gasps filled the room. The air went cold. Daniel stared. His jaw clenched. My heart plummeted. Slowly, very slowly, I turned my head toward Michael and Emily. They were both laughing. Laughing so hard Emily had tears in her eyes. Michael raised his glass toward me in a mocking toast, and in that exact second, something inside me finally snapped. The hall went silent. A silence so deep, so heavy, it pressed against my skin like a cold wind. My pulse thudded in my ears. The broken cake topper lay there like a tiny corpse, and the childish, vicious icing-written message glared back at me with cruel mockery. "Good luck, you're gonna need it." Everything inside me, every memory, every hope, every bit of strength, collapsed inward like a building losing its foundation. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat burned with humiliation. Daniel's hand slid to my lower back, steadying me as though he sensed the exact moment the ground shifted beneath me. "Jane?" he whispered, voice trembling with fury he was trying to control. But I wasn't trembling. Not anymore. Something colder than fear, colder than grief, started forming inside me. A kind of numbness that wrapped itself around my heart, not to protect it, but to preserve what was left. Across the room, Michael and Emily were still laughing. Emily covered her mouth dramatically, pretending to look shocked while still giggling. Michael whispered something in her ear. They both turned to me with identical smirks. They weren't ashamed. They were proud. Proud of humiliating me. Proud of humiliating Daniel. On my wedding day, the murmurs started among the guests. "Oh my God, who would do that? Was it the son? I can't believe this. How cruel." I felt eyes on me, sympathy, pity, discomfort, outrage. All of it stung. I wanted to hide. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk over to my son and shake him until he remembered who I was, until he remembered the mother who sacrificed everything for him. But I didn't move. Not until Daniel gently whispered, "Look at me." I turned my eyes toward him. He looked hurt, deeply hurt, but his expression softened the moment he saw mine. "Jane," he said softly, "you don't have to stay here. We can leave right now." "No," I whispered. "Not yet." A pause. "What do you want to do?" I stared at the ruined cake, the broken figurines, the message scrawled in icing. Then I looked at the faces around me, my friends, my family, Daniel's coworkers, people who had shown up with nothing but love. I took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. "I need to speak," I said quietly. Daniel hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes." I walked toward the DJ stand. The crowd parted like water around me. Their eyes followed me with a mix of worry and compassion. When I reached the DJ, I gently touched his arm. "May I use the microphone?" He nodded instantly, eyes softening. "Of course, Mrs. Harris. Mrs. Harris, my new name, my new beginning." I held on to that as I lifted the microphone. The feedback screeched faintly, then settled. The hall dimmed in volume until all I could hear was breathing, slow, expectant, heavy. My hands trembled slightly, but I steadied myself. I didn't look at Michael. Not yet. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice cracking slightly. "Tonight means more to me than you know. After losing my first husband, I didn't think I would ever love again. I didn't think I would ever have a day like this." Some guests nodded gently. "I spent years living in silence," I continued softly. "Years trying to be strong for my son, years believing that life had given me all the love it had to offer." I paused, swallowing hard, and then I met Daniel. Daniel's eyes softened and he bowed his head slightly. He didn't replace anything or anyone. He simply added light to a place inside me that had grown dark. The room remained silent, hanging on every word. "I love him," I said quietly. "I chose him, and today he chose me." A few women dabbed their eyes with napkins. I finally turned my gaze toward Michael. He sat back, arms crossed, expression defiant. Emily smirked beside him, completely unbothered. My heart cracked again, but it didn't break all the way. Not this time, because something stronger than heartbreak was growing inside me. "For many years," I said, locking eyes with my son, "I let myself believe that love has to be earned. That approval must be begged for. That happiness must be justified." Michael's smirk faltered just a bit. I continued, voice firming, "But I'm too old to live my life for anyone else's comfort." Guests murmured with agreement. "And I refuse," I said, voice rising just slightly, "to apologize for wanting joy." I took a long breath. "And I will not allow anyone to disrespect my husband." The room grew still. Emily's smirk disappeared. Michael's jaw clenched. I lowered the microphone slowly. "Thank you." As I handed the microphone back to the DJ, the hall erupted into applause. Not polite applause, not forced. Supportive, warm, loud. Daniel stepped forward and pulled me into his arms. "That was incredible," he whispered. "I'm shaking," I murmured against his shoulder. "You were brave." But the applause didn't soothe the sinking heaviness in my chest. Because as I looked past Daniel's shoulder, I saw Michael stand abruptly, his face twisted with anger. "Here it comes." He marched toward me, jaw tight, fists clenched. Emily followed, heels clicking sharply as though adding rhythm to his rage. When he reached me, he didn't lower his voice. "Was that supposed to make me look bad?" he snapped. A gasp went through the crowd. Daniel stepped slightly in front of me. "Lower your voice." "Don't tell me what to do," Michael barked, pointing a finger at him. I widened my eyes. "Michael, stop." "Stop," he repeated mockingly. "No, Mom, you stop. Stop pretending like you're some victim. Stop acting like you're happy. We all know this." He gestured wildly around him. "This whole wedding is ridiculous." I felt my heart fracture again. "Why would you say that?" he scoffed. Because it's true, you're acting like some lovesick teenager. It's embarrassing. Emily folded her arms. He's just being honest. Someone has to be. Daniel's voice was low, dangerous. Don't talk to her like that. Michael turned on him. You think you're some kind of saint? You're broke. You don't have a career. You're using her? Daniel stiffened. I am doing nothing of the sort. Oh, please, Emily laughed. We all know why men like you go after women her age. Gasps filled the room again. My hands began to shake, not with fear this time, but with anger. A deep, rising fire that I didn't recognize at first. Anger at being humiliated. Anger at being disrespected. Anger at being treated like a fool by the two people who should have loved me. I stepped forward. Enough, Michael glared. Mom, no, I said sharply. You do not get to speak to me or my husband like this. Husband, he muttered under his breath. God, that sounds ridiculous. Something inside me snapped so loudly I felt the break in my bones. Leave, I said. The word hit the room like a strike of thunder. Michael blinked. What? I said leave. Emily scoffed. You're kicking us out on your wedding night? Yes, I said firmly. Right now. Michael's face hardened. You're taking his side. I'm taking the side of respect, I replied, and you left that behind a long time ago. The room went dead silent. You're choosing him over me? He demanded, voice trembling with fury. I'm choosing myself, I said quietly, for the first time in my life. His eyes widened in disbelief. You're unbelievable. No, I murmured. I'm finally done being unbelievable to myself. Emily tugged Michael's arm. Come on, let her embarrass herself. They turned and stormed out, Emily muttering insults under her breath, Michael shaking his head angrily. The door slammed behind them. I stood there frozen, breathing hard, trying not to crumble. Daniel touched my arm gently. Jane, and that's when my knees buckled, not fully, not dramatically, just enough for him to catch me. He guided me into a chair as guests rushed forward, Linda, my sister, a few friends, all concerned, all soft-voiced and gentle, but their voices blurred into noise. All I could think was, I just threw my son out of my wedding. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I clutched Daniel's hand, trembling. What have I done? You did what you needed to do, he said softly. Tears welled again. He's my son, and he humiliated you, Daniel said firmly. Publicly, repeatedly, cruelly. I know, I whispered, voice cracking, but he's still my son. Daniel knelt in front of me, eyes steady. You didn't push him away. He pushed himself away. You just drew the line he crossed. I covered my face with my palms. I don't want to lose him. Daniel gently pulled my hands away and kissed my knuckles. Then he needs to come back respectfully. He needs to choose you too. I swallowed hard, tears streaming freely now. Do you think he ever will? Daniel didn't answer immediately. His silence spoke louder than any words. The rest of the night was a blur. Guests tried to lift the mood, dancing, celebrating, offering hugs and reassurances. And I tried, I really tried. I smiled. I took photos. I held Daniel's hand tightly. But inside, I was collapsing. The image of Michael laughing at the ruined cake, the sound of his mocking voice, the disbelief in his eyes when I asked him to leave, it replayed again and again until it felt like my brain was bruised from the repetition. When the final song played and the last guests were leaving, Daniel wrapped his arm around me. Let's go home, he whispered. Home, I repeated weakly. He opened the car door for me. I sat down, resting my head in my hands as he walked around to the driver's seat. I didn't even hear him get in. I only heard my own quiet sobbing fill the car. Daniel, I whispered, voice trembling. Yes, love, I think I've lost my son. Daniel reached over and pulled me gently into his arms. No, he murmured. You didn't lose him. He chose to walk away tonight. And if he doesn't come back, I whispered. Daniel kissed the top of my head. Then we will face that together. I closed my eyes, my heart aching in ways I wasn't prepared for. I didn't know then that the worst was yet to come, because by morning, everything would get even more complicated. And the fallout from what happened at my wedding would not end with the slammed door. It would begin there. I barely slept the night after confronting Liam and Emily in the kitchen. Somehow the ache in my chest, the humiliation replaying itself over and over from the wedding, and the weight of my own guilt formed a storm that wouldn't settle. It felt like every breath was a reminder that my son, my own flesh and blood, had looked at the man who loved me and laughed. And not just laughed, mocked, belittled, reduced him to a joke in front of our guests, as though I was some foolish woman chasing a teenage fantasy instead of healing from years of loneliness. I woke up feeling older than I had ever felt, older than the grief of my last marriage ending, older than the nights I cried myself to sleep, older than the years I spent raising Liam alone. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I had the strength to fix any of it. Daniel moved quietly beside me in the kitchen that morning. He didn't hover. He didn't press for answers. He just handed me a cup of warm tea and kissed the top of my head. "You don't have to carry everything alone, Jane," he whispered. I nodded because I couldn't trust myself to speak. The gratitude, the guilt, the love, they were all tangled. I didn't tell him what Liam had said in that kitchen. I didn't tell him that my son had accused him of using me, that he'd implied things cruel enough to crack any man's pride. Daniel wasn't fragile, but he deserved peace, not my son's judgment. But the words Liam had thrown at me wouldn't leave my mind. "Dad never mattered to you, but this random man does." Even now, hours later, the memory twisted my gut. Was that truly what my son believed all these years? Had I failed him without even knowing it? I thought I had given him love, stability, and warmth, but what if all he remembered were the nights I cried while pretending everything was fine? What if the memories he carried weren't of bedtime stories or school lunches or the nights we watched movies curled under one blanket, but the moments I had tried hardest to hide? A mother's love wasn't always perfect. I knew mine hadn't been. But I had never imagined that my attempt to rebuild my life could break my bond with the child I raised alone. Around noon, my phone buzzed for the first time since the confrontation. I froze at the sound. Daniel looked up from the garden through the kitchen window, concern flickering in his eyes, but he didn't come in. He knew I needed space. I picked up my phone with trembling fingers. It was a message from Liam. "I'm coming by later. Emily wants to talk too. We need to sort things out." Sort things out? As if feelings were boxes in a garage, as if the pain in my heart was some messy paperwork needing filing. I didn't reply. I didn't trust myself to. Hours later, the knock came. Daniel was in the study. I told him I wanted to talk to them alone. He didn't like it, I could see the worry in his face, but he respected my decision. I opened the door to find Liam standing there, hands shoved into his pockets, shoulders stiff, eyes defensive. Emily stood next to him, arms folded, face tight with something between discomfort and guilt. "Mom," Liam said quietly. "Come in," I whispered, stepping aside. They walked into the living room. It felt strange, like they were guests instead of family, like there was a wall between us none of us knew how to break. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Finally, Emily cleared her throat. "We should explain." Something about the phrasing, "we should explain," hit me wrong, as if they were about to give a justification instead of an apology. I took a slow breath. "I'm listening." Emily exchanged a look with Liam, then began. "We weren't trying to embarrass you," she said, her voice a little too practiced. Well, it was surprising. You got married so fast and we didn't really understand who this man was. It felt odd, and maybe we reacted badly. Maybe, her words danced around accountability, touching it without actually holding it. I stared at her for a moment, then turned to Liam, hoping, praying he would do better, but his jaw was clenched. "Mom," he said stiffly, "you have to understand our perspective too." My heart dropped. He still didn't get it. "Your perspective." Repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes," Liam said, taking a step forward. "You dropped this huge thing on us. One day you're single, the next you're married. You barely talked about him before the wedding. You didn't give us a chance to know him. It felt like you didn't want us involved." I stared at him, stunned. "Liam, I tried. I invited you two to dinner so many times. You canceled, every time." He looked away, guilt flickering but quickly buried. "We're busy, Mom, you know that." I swallowed back a wave of frustration. Yes, they were busy. Everyone was busy, but that didn't excuse cruelty. Emily spoke up again, a little softer this time. "It just seemed strange, and honestly, people were surprised. A few guests thought it was unusual." "Unusual?" I repeated, my voice shaking now. "You mean old, foolish, desperate?" Emily blinked, caught off guard. No, but Liam cut in. Okay, yes, people talk, Mom. You're almost 60 and he's 54, I snapped sharply. He's barely 6 years younger. For a moment, silence filled the room, thick, suffocating. Emily's eyes widened. We didn't know that. You didn't ask, I said quietly. You just assumed. Liam's cheeks reddened with something like embarrassment, but instead of softening, he hardened. Well, still, you have to admit it all happened fast. Fast? I whispered. Do you know how long I've been alone? Do you know how many nights I wished someone would care how my day was? Do you know how long I pretended I was okay for your sake? He opened his mouth, but I kept going, the dam inside me breaking open. You think I replaced your father? Liam, your father left me long before he died. He stopped seeing me as a partner. I was lonely in that marriage for years, and I stayed because of you, because I wanted you to have stability. His face twisted. I never asked you to stay. No, I said softly. You never did, and I didn't stay for you. I stayed for what I hoped our family could be. His eyes flickered, pain, confusion, anger, all mixed together. I took a breath. Daniel isn't replacing your father. He's not erasing the past. He's giving me something I haven't had in decades: kindness, companionship, respect. Emily shifted uncomfortably. Okay, she said quietly, but the wedding, it snowballed. Snowballed? I echoed. You mocked him. Emily swallowed. It was supposed to be a joke, she whispered. A joke? I choked out, tears forming. You humiliated me. You humiliated the man I love in front of our guests, in front of my friends. Liam's face tightened. We didn't mean for it to go that far, and anyway, you didn't defend us either when people made comments about how young we looked compared to the rest of the guests. I stared at him, stunned. That is not the same, I said. Maybe not, he muttered. It felt like you cared more about your new husband's feelings than ours. Because he was being mocked, I said sharply. By you? The air in the room grew heavier, like all three of us were suffocating under the weight of truths we had avoided for years. Then, in a voice much smaller than before, Liam whispered something that cracked open the truth I hadn't seen coming. Mom, you moved on too easily. My breath caught. There it was, not anger, not confusion, not embarrassment. Hurt. Deep, festering hurt. I felt something inside me soften, not in forgiveness, not yet, but in understanding. Liam, I said gently, I didn't move on easily, I moved on eventually. He sank onto the couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. I wasn't ready for it, he whispered. It felt like one day Dad was gone and then suddenly you weren't alone anymore. It didn't feel right. My heart twisted painfully. I know, I murmured, sitting beside him. I know it must feel sudden to you. But I was alone long before your father passed. You just didn't see it. He didn't look up. I put a trembling hand on his back. I didn't marry Daniel to erase your father. I married him because I wanted companionship, because I'm tired of carrying life alone. For the first time, Liam's eyes lifted to mine, full, glassy, vulnerable. I don't know where I fit anymore. The words hit me so hard I had to steady myself. Baby, I whispered, cupping his cheek the way I used to when he was young, you will always be my son. Nothing changes that, nothing. His lip trembled, but he looked away again, too proud to fully break. Emily watched quietly from the other couch, her face softer now, as though finally understanding the depth of everything unfolding. Mom, she said gently, we did mess up. The wedding, it was okay, and we're sorry, truly. Her eyes were sincere. This time, the apology was real. But I wasn't ready to offer forgiveness yet, not completely. Wounds didn't close just because someone said the right words. Healing needed time. I appreciate you saying that, I replied quietly. But you both need to understand something. What you did hurt Daniel deeply. And it hurt me even more. There are consequences to that. Liam swallowed hard. We'll talk to him. We'll apologize properly. You should, I said. But don't do it because I'm asking. Do it because you truly mean it. He nodded slowly. I took a deep breath. I love you both, but the way you treated me, the way you treated my husband, it can't happen again. We know, Emily whispered, but I wasn't done. This marriage is real. Daniel is a part of my life, a part of my family. Whether you feel ready to accept that or not is up to you, but disrespect won't be tolerated. Liam nodded again, eyes shining. Okay, he whispered. I understand. For the first time since the wedding, hope flickered inside me, not bright, not steady, but present. It would take time. Time for Liam to adjust. Time for Emily to understand. Time for me to heal. Time for Daniel to forgive. But maybe, just maybe, a path forward existed. The moment hung between us, heavy, quiet, emotional. Then Daniel stepped into the doorway, drawn by the silence. His eyes went to me first, checking if I was okay, then to Liam and Emily. No anger, no resentment. Just concern. Liam stood slowly, clearing his throat. "Daniel," he said, voice unsteady, "we need to talk." Daniel nodded calmly. "Of course," he said softly, "I'm here." And as the four of us sat together, the broken pieces of a fractured beginning, I realized something. Families weren't destroyed in one day, and maybe, just maybe, they didn't heal in one day either, but healing had begun. For 2 days after that conversation, the house felt strangely quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, unsure of what came next. Liam and Emily had left with the promise of apologizing to Daniel, but I didn't know when or if they would follow through. Daniel didn't ask what we had talked about. He didn't push, didn't pry, didn't dig at wounds still raw. He simply moved through the house with gentle patience, refilling my tea, brushing his hand lightly across my shoulder as he passed, sitting beside me at night without expecting conversation. But I could feel him worrying. He didn't want to come between me and my son. He didn't want to deepen the fracture. He didn't want to be the reason healing didn't happen. The burden weighed on him, even if he didn't say it aloud. On the third afternoon, while Daniel was in the garden trimming the roses he planted weeks before, I stepped outside and leaned against the railing. The air smelled like spring, soft, warm, hopeful. Daniel looked up when he noticed me. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. "No," I said honestly, "but maybe it will be." He put down the shears and walked over, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I'm sorry you're carrying this," he murmured. I sighed. "I'm sorry you were hurt because of me." "No," he said firmly, lifting my chin so I would look at him. "Don't ever say that. Their actions aren't your fault, and loving you, being with you, is worth any hard moment." The tears came fast and unexpected. "I don't want their resentment to poison us," I whispered. "It won't," he said softly, "unless you let it." I leaned into his chest, letting his arms wrap around me, grounding me. For the first time in days, I felt my heart beat slow. "We'll get through it," he whispered. But before I could answer, a car pulled into the driveway. Daniel and I stepped apart. My breath caught. My chest tightened. It was Liam and Emily. My heart thudded painfully as they got out of the car, both looking nervous, unsure, almost fragile. Daniel placed a steadying hand on my lower back. "You want me to stay?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered immediately, because healing had to involve all of us now. Liam approached first, hands trembling slightly. Emily walked beside him, clutching something in her hands, a small box, wooden, old. My stomach twisted. I recognized it. It was the memory box Liam had made in elementary school, the one where he kept things connected to his father. Why did he bring that? Liam stopped a few feet from us, swallowed, and said quietly, "Daniel, can we talk?" Daniel nodded, calm as ever. "Of course." But Liam shook his head. "I mean all of us, together." Daniel slipped his hand into mine. "We're here." Liam exhaled shakily, then opened the box. Inside were photographs of him as a child, of his father, of our old house. The memories almost knocked the breath out of me. He lifted a picture of him with his father on the beach, barefoot, smiling, sunburned, carefree. He held it for a long moment before speaking. "I blamed you," he whispered, voice breaking, "for moving on, for being happy again. I felt like it meant Dad didn't matter anymore." My eyes filled instantly. "Liam." He shook his head quickly, stopping me. "Let me say it," he whispered. "I need to." He looked at the picture again, then at me. "I was scared, Mom, scared that if you moved on, I would have to move on too, that it meant letting go of Dad, and I'm not ready for that. I don't know when I will be." Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. "But instead of telling you that," he said with a shuddering breath, "I acted like a child. I hurt you, and I hurt Daniel, and I'm so sorry." "To both of you?" Emily stepped forward, voice soft and steady. "We should have asked more questions instead of making assumptions. We should have given Daniel a chance before judging him, and I'm sorry too." Daniel's throat worked, but his voice stayed level when he spoke. "Thank you," he said gently. "Both of you, I know it wasn't easy." Liam swallowed hard. "I want to fix things," he said. I really do, but I don't know how, I don't know where to start. I stepped closer, taking his hands in mine. You start by being honest, I whispered, like you're doing now, and by understanding that loving Daniel doesn't erase your father. Memories don't disappear because life continues. He nodded, tears silently slipping down his face. And, he added hoarsely, I think part of me was jealous. I blinked, stunned. Jealous? He nodded again, eyes red. I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at Daniel, not even Dad in the last years. It confused me. It made me angry, because I thought. Should have been enough, my breath caught. Oh, sweetheart, I whispered, pulling him into my arms. You have always been enough. You were never competing with anyone. My love for you is different, unconditional, a part of my soul. Loving Daniel doesn't take anything from you. He clung to me, his body trembling. Emily wiped at her own tears quietly. After a moment, Daniel gently stepped forward. Liam, he said softly. Liam lifted his head. I'm not trying to take your place, Daniel said. Or replace your father, and I don't ever want you to feel like I'm stealing your mother away. I love her, and I want a chance to be part of your family too, if you'll let me. Liam stared at him, really looked at him for the first time, then he whispered, You make her happy. Daniel nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement. Liam sniffed, wiping his face with the back of his hand. I saw it, he said. At the wedding, before everything went wrong, she looked lighter. I haven't seen her like that in years. The confession broke something fragile inside me. I've carried guilt for so long, I whispered. Guilt for staying in a marriage that was dying. Guilt for leaving it too late. Guilt for being alone. Guilt for finding love again. And I need you to know I never stopped loving you, not for a second. Liam nodded fiercely. I know, I just forgot. We stood there together, 4 people connected by pain and love and loss, while the afternoon sun washed over us. Finally, Emily stepped forward, holding out the memory box. We want you to have this, she said softly. I pulled back, startled. What? No, Liam should. It's okay, he said, placing it gently in my hands. Dad was a part of your life too, and I think you should have some of these memories, not to live in the past, but to remember that you survived it. You survived all of it. My eyes blurred too much to see clearly, but I clutched the box to my chest. Thank you, I whispered. Then something unexpected happened. Liam turned to Daniel and opened his arms. Daniel didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and hugged him, tight, solid, warm, like a man who didn't want to replace a father, but wanted to be accepted as a human being with a good heart. Liam whispered something into his shoulder. I couldn't hear what, but I saw the relief in Daniel's eyes when he pulled back, and I knew it had been something meaningful. Emily stepped forward next and hugged Daniel too. Then she hugged me, and for the first time since the wedding, I felt the heavy knot in my chest begin to loosen. Over the next weeks, Liam and Daniel started talking, slowly, cautiously, about safe topics first, work, sports, small things that didn't carry emotional landmines. Emily began texting me casually again, sending recipes or asking about garden tips. I stopped waking up with dread in my chest. Daniel and I invited them for dinner every Sunday. At first, the meals were hesitant, awkward, but with each visit, the tension melted a little more. Liam apologized again, privately this time. Mom, he said quietly as we washed dishes one evening, I don't think I'll ever stop missing Dad, but I don't want to hurt you anymore because of that. I hugged him, letting the warm water run over our hands. You don't have to stop missing him, I whispered. You just have to start living too. And he nodded softly, deeply, as though he finally understood. It was a Sunday afternoon. Daniel was grilling outside, apron on, humming an old tune I'd never heard. Liam walked out onto the deck, watching him for a moment. Then, casually, naturally, he asked, Need help? Daniel looked surprised but pleased. Sure, grab the tongs. They stood side by side, talking, flipping burgers, laughing lightly. I watched from the doorway, my throat tightening. Emily slipped beside me and nudged my arm with a smile. They're bonding, she whispered. Finally, I nodded, too full of emotion to speak. When the food was ready, we all sat around the table. The sunlight cast a warm glow. Someone made a joke, I don't even remember what, and all 4 of us burst into laughter at the same time. Real laughter, shared laughter. Laughter that felt like something healing, something whole, something new. When dinner finished, Liam stood up, clearing his throat. Daniel, he said, lifting his glass, I owe you a toast. Daniel blinked, stunned. Liam smiled, not stiffly, not reluctantly, but genuinely. I judged you before I knew you, he said softly. I disrespected you at the wedding, and if you hadn't been such a good man, Mom and I might have lost something important. So, thank you for being patient, for loving her, and for giving me room to grow. Daniel's eyes glistened. He lifted his glass in return. And thank you, he said quietly, for giving me a chance. We clinked glasses. And in that moment, simple, quiet, fragile but real, I felt something inside me finally settle. Family, not perfect, not easy, not something that magically healed itself, but something we chose, something we worked for, something we rebuilt. After dinner, Liam hugged me for a long time. Mom, he whispered into my hair, I'm proud of you. Tears filled my eyes instantly. I'm proud of you too, I whispered back. He pulled away, smiling. Dad would have wanted you to be happy. My breath caught. Thank you, I whispered. He nodded softly, and that was the moment I knew, truly knew, that acceptance had finally come. After Liam and Emily left, Daniel and I sat on the couch, shoulders touching, hearts quiet. You did it, Daniel whispered. No, I said, threading my fingers through his. We did. He smiled, slow, warm, full of love. Do you feel at peace? For the first time, I whispered, leaning my head on his shoulder. Yes. He kissed the top of my hair. I love you, Jane. I love you too. And as the house settled into a gentle silence, I realized something. I had lived through heartbreak, through loneliness, through judgment and loss, through mockery at my own wedding, through the painful gap between mother and son. But in the end, love won, not because it was easy, not because it was perfect, but because we fought for it together. And this time, I wasn't carrying life alone.